The air was thick with the quiet hostility of a place that had already decided who mattered and who didn't. The building stood tall and self-important in the heart of the city, all marble floors and glass ceilings that reflected power back onto itself. Inside, voices hummed with restrained authority, footsteps clicked in patterns of hierarchy, and glances scanned for credentials. It was a place that rewarded appearances and punished the audacity of being out of place. So when she stepped through the lobby, small-framed, dressed in practical clothes with years of wear etched into their fabric, she was met not with greetings, but with suspicion. She moved quietly, yet purposefully. Her shoes didn't echo like the stilettos of the executives, nor did her bag speak the language of expensive leather. She carried no badge, no briefcase, no entourage. Just a folded folder in one hand and a weary calm in her face. Her skin was dark, her expression neutral, but her eyes saw everything. From the man at reception who subtly placed a hand over the panic button to the assistant who whispered and pointed from behind a frosted glass wall. She noticed. She always noticed. A tall man in a fitted suit blocked her path before she reached the elevator. His name badge read Tenant Relations Manager. He wore his authority like cologne, too strong, uninvited, and impossible to ignore. "Excuse me," he said, his voice filled with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged. "Can I help you? This area is reserved for residents and executives only." She met his gaze, unblinking. "I know," she said softly. His tone sharpened. "Then why are you even here?" She didn't answer right away. The silence between them stretched awkwardly, filling the grand lobby like a fog. Her hand briefly tightened on the folder. Around them, a few onlookers paused, the minor spectacle of confrontation breaking the monotony of spreadsheets and catered lunches. He pressed again, more insistent. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property." She blinked slowly. "I know," she said again and turned toward the security desk. By now, 2 guards had approached, summoned more by the man's discomfort than any actual threat. One of them moved to stand in her way, but she calmly opened the folder. Inside were documents, crisp and official, with gold seals and signatures bold enough to carry weight in a room full of arrogance. She handed one to the nearest guard. His eyes skimmed the page, and the confusion on his face spread like wildfire. The tenant relations manager leaned over to look. His face changed. "What is this?" She tilted her head, still calm, almost bored. "It's the deed." "Deed to what?" "To the building." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the silence shattered, replaced with whispers, shifting feet, and the faint sound of someone gasping near the receptionist's desk. The man in the suit looked up, his confidence cracked at the edges. "This must be a mistake," he stammered. She stepped forward, voice low and even. "The mistake is assuming I don't belong in a building I own." And with that, she walked past him. The elevator doors opened with a chime, and she stepped inside. No one followed. What they didn't know was that she had bought the building 2 months ago. Quietly. Anonymously. Through a holding company. She had waited, watching, letting their assumptions run wild. And now she was here to collect. And this was only the beginning. She didn't go to the top floor right away. Instead, she rode the elevator in silence, pressing the button for the 3rd. It was the floor with the leasing office, tenant registry, and legal archives, where names were signed on contracts and deals were recorded in silent halls of administration. She stepped out without a word, her presence stirring a flurry of movement behind glass doors. Phones were raised. Voices lowered. Curious heads peeked over cubicles. But none came close. Her presence alone created a gravity too dense to approach without certainty. Behind a polished desk sat a woman with narrowed eyes and a tightened mouth, the leasing coordinator. Blonde, efficient, suspicious. "Can I help you?" she asked, already reaching for her keyboard. The woman in the hallway held up a second document from her folder, sliding it onto the counter without urgency. "I'm updating the records," she said quietly. "My name should be listed as primary owner now." The receptionist glanced at the document, then at her, then back again. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. "I'm sorry. There must be some sort of..." "No mistake," came a firm voice from behind them. The office manager stepped forward, his suit impeccable, his presence practiced. He had been watching, waiting. He extended his hand toward the receptionist. "I'll handle this." He took the deed, read it, and with a subtle twitch of his brow, understood exactly who he was dealing with. His voice turned velvet smooth. "Would you like to come into my office?" She nodded once. Inside the glass-walled space, he closed the door and motioned toward a chair. She remained standing. I believe congratulations are in order, he began carefully. Though I must admit, we were expecting someone else when the purchase finalized. You were expecting someone whiter, she said flatly. And richer looking. He blinked, smiled faintly. We don't make assumptions here. You just enforce them. He opened a drawer, produced a file, and set it on the table. The paperwork is already in process. We'll update all signage and notify the tenants by end of week. Is there anything else you'd like us to arrange? Yes, she said. Schedule a meeting with every department lead. Today. He hesitated. She didn't. I'll need keys to every floor, too. Outside the glass walls, employees tried not to look like they were watching. But they were. Word had begun to spread. She exited without another word, leaving the manager to sort his face back into something neutral. On the 4th floor, she paused by the hallway that led to a small studio rented by a nonprofit. She had once stood outside this very hallway years ago, ignored and turned away while applying for grant funding. That door had never opened. Not for someone like her. She opened it now, with her own keys. Inside was a dim space, filled with half-used supplies and overlooked promise. It was one of the reasons she'd bought the building. That nonprofit and others like it would never again beg for square footage from people who looked through them like fog. Now she'd be the one deciding who got to stay. She looked around the room and smiled for the first time. It was a quiet smile, but it was real. Downstairs, the security team met to discuss what had happened in the lobby. She didn't even look like an owner, one said, confusion wrapped in nervous laughter. She looked like a cleaning lady, another added. No, the first corrected. She looked like someone who's been through too much to care about what we think. And they were right. She wasn't here to be liked. She was here to take back what people like them had always assumed was theirs. And the building had no idea what kind of owner it now belonged to. The conference room on the 12th floor wasn't built for her, but now it belonged to her. Polished oak table, 10 leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city skyline. It had once hosted men who had laughed her out of meetings, who had told her that the building doesn't make room for everyone. Now, the same room awaited her orders in tense silence. She walked in without waiting to be announced. 5 department heads were already seated. They glanced up, hesitated, and fumbled into standing when they realized she wasn't there to clean the windows. They had all heard by now. One stood slowly. The man from the lobby. Gray suit, red tie, proud voice. He didn't speak first this time. She sat at the head of the table and opened her folder. Quietly, no one breathed too loudly. This meeting is for alignment, she said. New policies, new oversight, new values. Someone coughed. Another scribbled notes, unsure what was safe to record. Some of you, she continued, have confused status with merit, appearance with authority. Let's correct that. The silence cracked a little. The man in the red tie tried to reclaim his position. With all due respect, we've run this place efficiently for years. This sudden shift, it's a shock to our system. No, she said. The shock was finding out how many people like me were excluded from opportunities in a building meant to serve the public. Your system isn't broken. It was designed this way. A woman 2 seats down cleared her throat. What are you proposing, exactly? She turned a page. Equity audits, accessible programming, sliding rent scale for nonprofits, and community voting rights for any expansion plans. Murmurs. The red tie man leaned forward. This could collapse our financial model. She met his eyes. It'll collapse your privilege. The building will be just fine. He tried to argue again, but she had already stood. This isn't a democracy, she said. It's ownership. I'm the one with the keys now. She left them in stunned silence. Downstairs, the lobby had changed. The cleaning crew paused when they saw her. One of them, an older woman with weary eyes and a cautious smile, stepped forward. They say you're the new owner, she whispered. I am, she answered. The woman nodded slowly. We never thought someone like us. You were never the problem, she said. The woman smiled. She hadn't been called visible in years. By noon, The new signage was being printed. Her name, not in cursive or gold leaf, just bold, plain text. Simple, powerful, undeniable. She watched from the rooftop as the letters were affixed to the side of the building. It looked right. This building wasn't just brick and glass anymore. It was a monument, not to power, but to perseverance. To the audacity of showing up where you're not welcome and staying anyway. Someone once asked her, "Why are you even here?" Now they all knew. The weeks that followed turned her quiet triumph into a city-wide conversation. Newspapers ran the headline, "Janitor turned owner shakes up downtown power structure." Others were less gracious. "Affirmative action victory or overreach?" read one editorial. But she didn't answer to headlines. Her work answered for her. She arrived early every morning, not out of habit but by intention. She wanted the tenants and staff to see her in command, to unlearn their own reflexive dismissals. The security guard who once eyed her badge suspiciously now stood at attention when she passed. The receptionist who once hesitated to hand her visitor passes now called her by name, "Ms. Rhodes," and said it like it meant something. On Mondays, she met with the legal team. Tuesdays were for community engagement proposals. Wednesdays were for walking the building, not to inspect, but to observe. She noticed which doors stayed closed, who lingered near elevators without being greeted, whose voices never made it into the main conference room. One afternoon, she stood near the maintenance corridor where the incident had happened, the same hallway where a younger version of herself had been told, "Why are you even here?" She lingered by the vending machine. A custodian passed, nodding respectfully. "You don't have to say anything," she told him. "But you can." He paused. "They used to say the same to me, never in front of others. But you could feel it. Every day." She nodded. "That's going to change." Later, she hosted a town hall. The tenant companies were invited. So were the janitors, the mailroom workers, the IT interns, the part-time assistants. She had chairs for everyone. "Welcome," she said, taking the podium. "This building belongs to the people who make it function. So we're rewriting what belonging means." The crowd was silent at first, skeptical. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then more. She didn't smile. She absorbed it. Her policies weren't symbolic. By the end of the month, shared childcare space was underway. Elevators had updated access systems not to exclude, but to protect. Employee liaisons were appointed in every department, regardless of hierarchy. Of course, resistance followed. A few executives began talking about relocating their operations. They claimed she was politicizing space, that she had no background in commercial property management. She met that with facts, figures, and full ownership deeds. When they pushed harder, she bought out 2 of their leases. Quietly, without drama, just power. The man in the red tie. He tried to rally others into signing a letter of protest. Only 3 did. One later sent her a private apology. Her office had no portrait, no ego wall, just a single framed photo of her mother, wearing scrubs, asleep in a bus seat. The caption underneath was handwritten. "Don't forget where you're from, even when they want to forget you're here." By the end of the quarter, the lobby was different. Brighter, fuller, more diverse in color, in clothes, in confidence. People stopped asking why she was there. They asked how they could do the same. As her influence grew, so did the weight of expectation. It wasn't just a building anymore, it was a symbol, a living rebuttal to years of exclusion, and she had become its unintentional spokesperson. Local nonprofits reached out for partnerships. Colleges asked her to speak. Documentarians requested interviews. But she turned most of it down. Not out of arrogance, but because the building wasn't finished yet. Neither was she. On the surface, everything was operating better than ever. Profits had risen. Vacancy rates had plummeted. The press called it the Rhodes effect. Investors wanted to replicate it. But behind the polished reports and strategic press clippings, she kept watch over one quiet detail: the people. Not just their names or titles, but their stories, their rhythms. Who lingered in stairwells to avoid eye contact. Who took the service entrance when the main lobby was open. who still whispered, "I'm sorry," before asking a question. She began hosting anonymous listening sessions, no names, no hierarchy. People spoke about their invisible scars, about laughter they didn't feel permitted to share. She took it all in, and she built something out of it. A new floor was opened, technically a mezzanine, carved from an old record storage area. She transformed it into a space called the Commons, equal parts work lounge, childcare hub, community room, and storytelling wall. People thought it was just a break room, but it was more than that. It was the heartbeat. She placed a bronze plaque by the door. "You belong here. If anyone says otherwise, send them to me." Not everyone celebrated. Anonymous emails circulated. "This isn't how buildings are run. This is woke nonsense. Merit, not pity." She read each one, then filed them under irrelevant, because something else had begun happening. Tenants who had been passive started replicating her methods. One law firm added a mentorship program for support staff. A tech startup diversified their leadership team and asked for her feedback. Even the cafe downstairs renamed itself Unity Grounds and hired someone who once quit after being ridiculed for their accent. Then came the City Award. A glossy gala, red carpet, applause. She wore a black suit with quiet stitching in gold, barely noticeable, but enough to remind her of who she'd become. The speech was expected. The audience was primed. But when she reached the podium, she held the microphone and paused. "Years ago," she began, "a man in a red tie told me, 'Why are you even here?' I didn't have an answer then. I was hurt. I felt small. But today I want to thank him, because I realized the answer wasn't about proving myself to him. It was about building a space where no one else would have to ask that question again." She stepped down to a standing ovation. But that wasn't the moment that mattered. The moment came the next morning, when a new janitor, barely 19, shy, eyes lowered, passed her in the corridor. She nodded. "You look tired," she said gently. The young man chuckled nervously. "Yeah, first night shift." She handed him a coffee, not store-bought, brewed from the small office kettle she still used. "Let me know if you need anything," she said. He looked up, really looked. "Are you?" "Yes," she said. "I'm the one who owns this place." His eyes widened, then softened. He didn't say thank you. He said, "Then maybe I can too." And that, more than any title or deed, was the legacy she had fought for. The final test didn't arrive as a grand confrontation, but as silence. A new development corporation had bought 3 adjacent properties and set its sights on revitalizing the neighborhood. That word, revitalizing, was code for erasure. They sent a proposal requesting a meeting. The subtext was clear: sell or be surrounded. She reviewed their presentation. Every slide was sleek, minimal, indifferent. There was no mention of the history of the block, the community programs in her building, the people. Just yield projections and renderings of glass towers. At the meeting, their lead representative, young, Ivy League, and perfumed with certainty, spoke at length about synergy and brand cohesion. He didn't ask her a single question. When he finished, he smiled tightly. "We're offering above market value," he said, sliding the packet across the table. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." She didn't touch the folder. "I don't need a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," she said evenly. "I built mine." He blinked. Uncertain now. Flipping to strategy mode, he leaned forward. "We'll buy everything around you. We'll block your views, rezone your access roads. You'll be an island." She stood, adjusting the gold-threaded pin on her blazer, shaped like a key. "I've been an island before," she said. "But I've also been the tide." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the top-floor observatory where years ago she'd once hidden during cleaning shifts. She watched the city breathe, watched how the lights blinked in imperfect rhythms, how sirens harmonized with laughter in the distance. The next morning, she called a press conference, not to fight, but to reveal. She unveiled a plan, not just for her building, but for the surrounding lots. In the months prior, she'd quietly bought minority shares in several nearby properties. She had invested in people, in possibility. She'd partnered with a coalition of grassroots urbanists, educators, and local vendors to propose an alternative, an open campus concept that prioritized culture, co-creation, and affordability. The press buzzed. Headlines shifted. Black woman developer redefines city core. Ownership with a soul. the building that changed the block. But what mattered to her wasn't the articles. It was the small notes she found taped to her office door. "Thank you for seeing me. My son wants to intern here. I've started writing again. I thought you should know." Months later, the young janitor she'd once met returned. He wore a suit, a hesitant smile, and carried a small folder. "I'd like to propose a startup idea," he said, "for community-based security systems." She invited him to sit. He looked around the office, still half expecting rejection. "Is it too ambitious?" "No," she said, offering him tea. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." In the end, the woman they had once dismissed, excluded, questioned, and underestimated had not only protected her space, she had expanded it. Not just upward, but outward. Not just in concrete, but in dignity. So when they asked her again, "Why are you even here?" the answer was simple: to make sure no one else has to ask.